Put up.
You should post. We're live. Yes, we are. What's going on, guys?
Yeah.
Not much, man.
Welcome to the Halloween live stream. Are you guys doing anything for Halloween?
Nothing.
Yes, no, didn't do anything last
night.
So
somebody definitely has some candy down at the apartment beside me outside their door. So I'm not taking candy every time I leave my apartment.
Morgan's frozen.
Yeah, I saw as soon as we go live.
As soon as we go live, yeah. How funny. We need to get the live stream here shared in the Pomps Slack channel. Give them. But anyways, yeah. No, I'm too old to be doing any sort of that's a total fucking lie. I'm definitely young enough to be doing.
You want to just go over what you did last night, buddy?
It wasn't Halloween. Mom and Dad haven't don't get a lot of chances to be out with people, and I didn't conduct myself appropriately.
You didn't conduct yourself?
Yeah.
You know, you conducted yourself in the appropriate behavior. Just the appropriate behavior was inappropriate behavior, so it's fine.
I guess so. Enough talking about that. So yeah, it's Halloween. The reason why I bring up it's Halloween today, as we all know, I guess maybe not, but the Satoshi white paper was written 13 years ago today, I think. So here's the thing, right? Twitter Spaces, and CK. I don't know who CK is. He's head of programming at Bitcoin Magazine. Work with him, great guy. But we had Corey Klippstein from Swan Bitcoin up in the Twitter space, and like everyone's always been like, yeah, spook with the anniversary of the white paper. It's been like a thing.
He was like, no.
He was like, he has, I guess, from the blocks and timestamps, apparently, maybe the white paper was released tomorrow.
Yeah,
everything I thought for the last 4+ years.
Yeah, I don't know.
What is real anymore, right?
But there was.
I feel like this would be a pretty easy thing to verify.
I feel like with the amount of people that think that it came out today, like it's going to be kind of hurtful.
Yeah.
If everyone's like a day wrong.
All right,
watch
guys,
it came out. It probably came out like 12:01 a.m. November 1st.
Something ridiculous like that. Are we back?
Sorry, I had to re-up. Yeah, I was like talking to you guys, and I realized you couldn't hear me or see me, and I was like,
"No, you like wow, straight up froze. You're you side
damn Alaska
internet on right there."
What did I do? What'd you say?
Side chain.
Yeah, dude, I hard forked the live stream.
Straight up fork.
All right, let's go. We've been fucking stalling here, so apologies.
Yeah, let's get on top of it.
Let's get on top of it.
Where do you want to start, Alan?
I was saying, today,
Bitcoin white paper was released. And I was addressing the fact that Corey Klippstein is claiming that it actually was on November the 1st, but I like it being on Halloween, and I'm going to not verify, and I'm going to trust. Trusting it's released today.
Is that like it depends on what time zone you're in kind of situation? Because that would be really lame.
It might be that, you know, goddamn Australians, always ahead.
Goddamn Australians, always living in the future. This is crazy.
Are they ahead? I thought that they were behind.
No, they're ahead.
In a lot of ways they're behind, but in
a lot of ways they're behind.
No, any Australian listeners out there, we love you.
about like the path that Australia's been taking recently.
Yeah. I've also heard from a lot of my Aussie friends that it's just one state where that's happening. It's not like,
Yeah.
Countrywide.
Oh, which state?
I don't know if that makes it. I don't know if that makes the case any less worse, though. Maybe a little bit by like a fraction of a degree.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's still a bummer. It's still a bummer.
I do kind of want to talk about where the world was 13 years ago.
Yeah.
And I would almost argue that the world was in a better place. I take that back. Was in a better place 13 years ago. They still had a lot of power and a lot of say until the white paper was released. And now it's like the inverse, right? Like government had fucked up, but they still had a lot of control. Fucked up again, except this time we have Bitcoin and we're fingers, right?
Dropped them out.
But anyway, so first article here today by Namcios. Just detailing just kind of the rollout of the white paper, right? So he goes and he kind of just a little bit of the background to anonymous creator Satoshi Nakamoto wrote it, and he starts off by saying research paper detailing the engineering and design requirements to enable the first distributed, uncensorable electronic digital cash system to come to life was 13 years ago. The Bitcoin white paper publicized the long-sought resolution to of all previous attempts to build digital cash. So, some context: 13 years ago, 07-08 financial crisis, right? Had a lot to do with banks over leveraging subprime. People are just borrowing money left and right, lending it out left and right to people who really shouldn't have been borrowing money. And when these institutions over leveraged, what happened? They got bailed out by the big banks, and ultimately the people at the top suffering the consequences, I guess, or of high time preference thinking.
Bad decision.
They ended up having parties, and they took the bailout money, their company parties on their big nice yachts and planes. They got the bottoms who ate the dust.
They socialized the losses.
Yeah, and so essentially, Satoshi person or group of people write this miraculous white paper detailing a peer-to-peer cash system independent government. Fast forward, where are we at now? Global pandemic. Again, lots of overspending. This time by right. So it's weird, right? The 07-08 financial crash was on the banks. Those were like the vilified companies.
Right.
But now this go around with the pandemic and like the shutdown of small businesses. It's not so much the banks. I think the banks are a little bit in the spotlight, but it's more so the big conglomerate corporations, right? So like your Amazon, your Target, your big boxes that are like. Go ahead, Morgan.
Well, I was going to say, I think it has to do with the vector of instability, right, that we're seeing in the economy. So if you take a look at 07-08, really the biggest vector was, as you said, the housing market, but more specifically, right, like these larger banks that were bundling all those products and then selling them, right? And so, the root cause of the instability was an economic cause. That was very much the bank's fault, right? And so that's where we kind of see the root cause of the instability in 07-08. And so naturally, right, like that's where the Fed kind of targeted their QE and a lot of like their stability, enforcing practices. And I say that, right, in air quotes, stability, right? Like we know the Fed says that they kind of work for stability, but they don't really. But this year, right, it wasn't fundamentally an economic issue, right? Like fundamentally, it was because this disease was being passed around the planet. But ultimately, right, like then we ended up shutting down our economy and we made it an economic issue. And when you shut down your economy, right, where does that instability manifest? It's in those corporations who employ people, because if you shut down all their revenue, they can't employ people, right? So I think fundamentally it kind of came from different angles. And so I think the response that we see is very much different. That being said, right, like in 2007, 2008, prior to that, right, like the Feds hadn't really used quantitative easing at all, right? And then they kind of saw that they could prevent an economic collapse, right? So they could prop up the stock market, protect people's savings, maintain, right, the banking system. And actually, they used that time to consolidate the banking system, right? So they had more tight control over it. But by and large, right, like they avoided a very large recession. I'm not saying like what they did was right, but effectively what they did is we avoided a really large recession. And so I think in a lot of people's minds, they looked at QE in 2007, 2008 and said, hey, that worked. And so now, right, in the pandemic, even though it's fundamentally a different issue, and by the way, like you'd be able to solve this problem if you just opened up the economies. They're like, here's this Band-Aid that we can just slap on anything and it works pretty well, which is why they went crazy with it. So the magnitude, right, of the QE we see now is just off the charts.
I don't like the word
Worked.
right. Like it's more of like it's
The issue down to the next administration.
So like
This will work
for the next 4 years, maybe if we have 2 terms. But eventually, this problem that we're ignoring is just growing and growing and growing and growing. And then you look at like
just like the debt
cycles and just how much more spending we're having to do and how much more money printing we're having to do. It's a good thing,
right?
Is like
the global reserve like money currently.
Currency, yeah.
But
and you see that manifested in debt levels, right? So like the debt levels, the average debt level of governments, of institutions, of individuals was a lot lower before the crisis than after. So it's like you're right, like to the Fed's point of view, right? It worked because they don't give a fuck about the debt levels before and after. But we kind of see that it settles to a new bottom, but that new bottom is a lot higher. And so it ends up becoming this ticking time bomb over time. So it's good to point out, Alan.
Have you guys seen? Go ahead, Sean.
Have you seen this video right here?
No.
So I think that this plays into what we're talking about, which is just lack of faith in the system as time continues to go, and the lack of transparency that exists between governments. And this is the Romanian MEP.
Let's see it.
The article says these contracts were disclosed to us and to the public. And I want to show you some of those pages. And you tell me if this is okay for the European citizens to be exposed to this situation where they cannot come to work, they cannot enter a store, they cannot go with their kids to schools, where they cannot freely move from one country to another, unless in one situation is vaccinated with one of these products. So these are the contracts that were disclosed by the Commission with the approval of the company. This is unheard of. And I will just show you the pages. These are the pages. You see? They call this transparency. So this is the fundamental principle, right?
Here, pause
this real quick. So
I'm asking you guys.
So for those who can't see or like aren't watching right now, right? This guy, who is
this?
He's a Romanian MEP, Christian. I don't know how to pronounce his last name. Terras.
Okay. The pages he was showing, they're just fully redacted. They look like some CIA black pages.
It's nothing. It's just all completely blacked out. And he has like one final line to this video that I think is just it's a simple explanation of tyranny in government.
Is this transparency? Do you see anything? Because we don't. European citizens' money have been given by Ursula von der Leyen to these companies. What happened with this money? What are they? Why are they open with the people and fully transparent? So we all know what is going on.
I
The
got you.
difference between tyranny and democracy. It's very simple. When the government knows everything about you, that's tyranny. I know how it is to live in tyranny. When you know everything about your government, that's democracy.
I just thought
This
that
kind
was
of
a
brings up an
interesting
interesting-
video.
Well, I was just saying this brings up an interesting point because we're talking about, right, like this crisis, this moving crisis, right? So in 2007, 2008, we said that, okay, QE works, right? Or maybe it doesn't, right? But it kind of worked for the situation.
It's
we
the
needed it
flex.
to.
It's the flex.
Right. But
Yeah.
then you get this compounding debt on top of that increases over time. But on top of that, what Sean's really alluding to is we get this loss in credibility of central governments as well. And so that's another symptom that we're seeing over time increase because, the actions that they're taking, they've shown kind of time and time again that they might not be the most trustworthy party. And so those are two things that are really going to mitigate their ability to do effective policy in the future, right? One, there's be too much debt, and two, people aren't going to believe what they say. Is that kind of what you're getting at, Sean?
Yeah, for sure. I think going back to, what Alan was saying at the beginning, just comparing where we were 13 years ago to now, it's just much more of an understanding of the ineptitude of governments, of the failure of transparency of governments, of the manipulation, and debasement of currencies. And, it all stems from these centralized institutions that are just incentivized to do things in the way that they do them. They're not incentivized to do them in a fair and equitable way.
I mean, look at these numbers.
I get the world clock up of like all the countries, right? And you look at
Just like some of the G7
nations, right? So excluding China,
excluding
actually, I don't see Russia on here. But this is what scares me the most, right? Is you look at all the
G7s,
right? You start the USA, so our public debt to GDP
at 100%,
and the external
debt to GDP
is over 100 at 142, right? Obviously not good, but then like you start
like the UK,
right? Public debt to GDP ratio 114,
14.
external debt to GDP. Like I don't even know how that's a thing.
How do you get to
328%,
328%?
right? Like how are you gonna, like, how are people gonna continue?
Yeah. Well, they can just
Right.
debase their currencies and tax their citizens, through inflation to get out of it.
Or through unreal,
Right? Like,
Right.
it's
I mean, that's where this is all heading.
yeah. You look at like
France,
260, Belgium, for Christ's sake,
319.
right? And then we look at China, 54%
Yeah.
public.
So this
13%
becomes
external debt.
a big problem when the amount of so right, why would you care about these debt numbers, right? You're like, okay, it's just a number. Like, okay, governments are taking a bunch of debt. Like, does that really matter in the long term? It becomes a problem when the service payments you have to make on that debt. So a service payment similar to like a payment you have to make on a loan. So when somebody loans you, money for, a house or a car, right? There's a certain amount of money you're paying each month. That's principal, right? So that's the original loan amount. But then there's an amount on top of that you're paying that's compensating that person for lending money to you, right? So that's like debt servicing, right? That's kind of what we call. And so these high debt numbers become, or percentages, right, become a problem when the service payments that you're making on debt make up a really large part of your GDP, right? Or like your economic output. And so if you're just throwing a bunch of your economic output at servicing money that you borrowed in the past instead of investing in stuff for the future, that actually slows future growth, and it makes your ability to service debt in the future less than it is today. And so that's when it becomes a really big problem, because then it just slows the whole economy down. On top of that, right, if people like Yellen want to tax unrealized capital gains, those are, that's taxing some of the most efficient capital allocators in our country. If we just look at Elon Musk, right? Like Elon Musk has a bunch of money, but it's not liquid money, right? It's all in Tesla and SpaceX. And so all of that money is actually being productively used to go to outer space and to literally drive the US into a renewable energy future. Those are really fucking productive uses of capital, right? And so if you couple those two things, where we're not allocating capital correctly, and then we're also servicing a bunch of this debt in the past, the whole economy will slow down, and quality of life will kind of stagnate. And so that's like the real fear behind a lot of this stuff. Not even to mention the fact that the currency could just collapse because a government starts printing too much. So that's my take from an economic angle.
In the example that you give, it's the exact opposite of the example that the left is giving in support of unrealized capital gains, because you're like, Elon's productively using this money to be able to fund things like going into space and trying to better humanity and stuff like that. And then on literally the flip side, people are like, these people have too much money that they're wasting it on going to space, tax the fuck out of them. Right. It's like there's just a polar opposite view.
Yeah. No, I think it's like humanity, right? We need to understand that feeding people and going to space are not mutually exclusive, right? Like they actually help each other. If we create an environment where we can strive to, go to outer space and to, inspire people to solve all of these problems that humanity faces, we're going to solve those problems. And so, it's just really incredible. Alan, I see you're still sharing your screen. Is there something that on this page you wanted to just call out real quick?
No, I'm just looking. I just noticed on the bottom, towards the bottom right, on the right side here, they have
ratio now.
And just some stuff here, with crypto ratio. I don't know what the crypto they're talking about. I don't know if it's or all the cryptocurrencies, but this big one here, paper to gold, it's $84
or what, but it's just crazy how far
removed we are from the gold standard. It was just but to your point, Morgan, about and Sean, your point too about just how maybe I don't know. I hate using the words right and left.
I hate that.
But for lack,
I'm trying to live outside
terms,
of that.
The more progressives, right? They tell you that we need to focus in on just the environment. We need to not be going to space. We need to create higher wage. We want to do all these conflicting things, right? Where the easiest
solution, and this is the problem with money,
the problem of unsound fake money, right? Is we've overcomplicated so many facets of life, and when in reality, the solution to all the problems is very simple, and it what pure capitalism should be, right? It's a free and open market where the best
rewarded
by everybody. And previously, right before the internet, it was it was a lot easier for certain corporations to get away with shady business practices, right? Because word of mouth around as quickly as it used to be. But nowadays with the internet, right? If you have a company that's screwing over people, people are going to be pretty quick to be hey, screw this. But companies right now, especially the big conglomerative ones that do all the kinds of law stuff in Congress, they can get away a lot with a lot because a lot of the money, all the money right now is currently controlled by the government, big banks. But if we move towards this more free and that
point incentivizes,
right, not only are we moving into a direction where playing field's kind of leveled, but when you're reintroducing a hard, scarce asset as the basement of currency, not only do really think about like business decisions, right? Like a quarterly basis, or even at the government level, right, with quantitative easing, they're gonna actually try for like some real legitimate solutions that solve the problem. And if they fail, good. Like putting band-aids on an already falling tower. Like let these things collapse and let the new come out organic, better than whatever the. I don't know. I'm rambling.
And I know I've been talking a lot, but I think there's a nuance to what you're saying too, which is, money right now has become a tool for government to control, right? And they use that to attain policy decisions, right? Effectively, then what that leads to is companies, right, can do shady shit, warm up to the government and kind of get themselves close to the money printers and whatever. It's a way for the government to kind of control that process. What happens when we get sound money separate from the state is money becomes something that a tool for accountability to corporations and to the government, because now, like, who is controlling the money, right? It's the people on aggregate. And so the people, right, can keep the government in check with a vote, right? That's a pretty powerful mechanism. But an even more powerful one is by controlling the money, right? So if the people control the money, the government has to fairly acquire that money, right, by doing good stuff. And so, people are not going to give the government money if they're, doing shady shit. Likewise, right, like corporations can't just cozy up to the federal government and sit close to the money printer, right? They actually have to go create value. And if they don't, right, there's nobody can bail them out, right? Exactly what you're saying. And so that introduces economic accountability and economic resiliency in our economy, which we're completely missing today.
Yeah, no, big time. Which, to tie into the point we were making, like where are we at 13 years later, right? I don't know. You guys tell me. Do you feel like we're in a better position now, or do you think than it was in 2007, or do you think we're in a worse situation?
I think
personally
in
think it's better.
I'm sorry, we're good.
No, Sean, I've been talking a lot. I had my coffee. I'm stoked. So you go for it.
I was just gonna say, I think whenever you think about it in the box of the current existing system, that we're a lot worse off. But the moment that you add that we're worse off, but we also have a solution, I would argue that puts us in a better place, right? Because Bitcoin serves as the solution for the problem, because the system, in my opinion, has no way left to succeed aside from tolerance, right? It's as long as the world economy at large continues to say, all right, let's just continue debasing everything into oblivion and continue printing money because we have no other possible solution. In the moment we taper, everything's going to go to shit. That's a much worse scenario than we were in 2007, but we have a way to fix it.
My take's a little different. So I believe that, like, the U.S. government, right, as far as state capacity that we've seen in action movies, right, we've all seen it. Like the U.S. government, they're like, we need the CIA on site in 10 minutes. And then they like show up and it's like, they're like super functional and they're like, know exactly what to do. They set up a tent city in like 3 hours and they're like on it. Right. That's not the U.S. government we have. I don't think that's the U.S. government we ever had. I'm kind of the belief that the U.S., the government and states around the world have kind of always been inadequate, but it's really taken these crises to reveal that. And so I would argue, like, maybe we were worse off, 10 years ago or 13 years ago, because these governments were pretty dysfunctional, but it just hadn't been revealed to us yet. Right. I think fundamentally just based on the structure. So
I think
now we
I
know,
think-
and now we kind of can pinpoint the issue and try to find a solution.
I think to a certain degree,
Morgan, you're
you're definitely correct.
correct. I think most levels of government are very in that,
Especially
especially like the in between
levels from like
federal and like local, right? Somewhere in between there, between states and everything, there's like this whole like Truman Show. I don't even know if Truman Show is like
the right analogy to use, but like
it's turned into a reality show for the most part. That's what a lot of people pay attention to. That's CNN, Fox, MSNBC kind of get their ratings, right? But I do think that there is a very high level
of government that is very
organized and effective at steering the narrative to what's best in their own personal favor, right? Otherwise, I mean, you should look at like the Cold War and all of the advancements that were made.
it was a lot of government acting,
A lot of government doing. But as we move into,
especially
like finally with like the transformation of money, the tides are definitely shifting a lot. And I don't think the old guard, and by old guard I mean really knows how to tackle the situation. And it seems like rather than fight it, they're kind
but they know there's nothing
nothing they can do. If they fight it harder, more people are going to jump in, and their legitimacy is going to continue to wane off into one and to the point that they
are no longer a factor, right?
But it's interesting at the same time, multiple governments
Competing
with one another and competing with their own people now. It's like a weird
4D chess game, very very weird 4D chess game,
and
it's no
to me it's like no coincidence that we're having I don't maybe you guys disagree with this, but I think this is appropriate to call
attempt at
an authoritarian grab, and
also
the greatest attempt at freeing the world
to an anarcho-capitalistic state.
I don't think it's any
coincidence that
those two ideologies are butting head to head right similar to
1980s,
1970s Cold War between democracy and communism at that time. And for me, so to answer the question that are we living in a better time? I think we're living in a definitely more intense time for sure. But freedom at the end of the day has always won. Tyranny, small victories, but ultimately like open and least restricted policies are what win at the end of the day. And what is that right now? It's Bitcoin. It's not the Fed. This digital currency that's more than just a currency that a lot of people, especially post-pandemic, are starting to recognize like, hey, like things aren't right. Things haven't been run right in the last decade and a half.
this year is going to be
they're going to be ones.
that's for sure.
A lot of things are going to change. A lot of power dynamics are going to change. How that's going to play out, like
nation state level
and individual level, I don't know.
It's
literally I think it's impossible to predict.
But it's exciting because we have a role to play now as the people. In the past, you have to wield armies or political favor or whatever. And revolutions happen, but they're typically really violent and unpleasant to live through. But Bitcoin is like that tool that we can use to peacefully take some power away from the establishment. And we don't have to go fight them in the streets for it. Right. So that's what's really exciting to me. or maybe as of now, right? Maybe at some point we will have to stand up, but Bitcoin as a mechanism, right? We don't have to seize the power. We just need to just turn away from the legitimacy of central governments and international organizations like the IMF, for example. There's your segue.
Speaking of which, apparently somebody on this channel is writing a thesis in economics. If you'd like to talk about that.
Yeah, so this is actually Sean's article. I'm going to point that out. So FollowFiat, it's the same guy, and he wrote this article. I thought it was awesome, and it specifically kind of relates to one of the things that I'm focusing on, which is central bank monetary policy spillover. So I'm writing a thesis right now. I'll be running a regression. I'm pulling data from all kinds of places and trying to quantify the federal, monetary policy. So I'm kind of using like the shadow rate to do that. It's a data set from 2016. And then I'm also going to use a bunch of, diagnostic data. But the countries that I'm looking at specifically to indicate this spillover are dollarized countries and then countries that have active IMF advisory. And so in doing this, right, I had to do a lot of reading and research on the IMF, kind of what they do. The fact that countries with active IMF programs actually have worse outcomes than countries that don't. And just kind of understand what they're all about. And so I thought this was a great article because it talks about not only the IMF, right, but just it's kind of analogous to larger international organizations. And I think this is like the establishment of the establishment, right? If we look at, central governments, they've been around for a little while, but this is really the first attempt of sovereign institutions to create a global standard and consolidate that power in a way that we really didn't see before. And so I think analyzing the IMF's position in Bitcoin is really, really revealing to kind of the feelings of this establishment of this power being taken away from them. So I think these quotes that you put in here, Sean, are awesome. So I would love to just take a look at those real quick.
Yeah, thanks. I just think that it's audastic for them to be as open as they are. Like, I mean, so who makes up the IMF? I'm not the one sharing my screen. So, Alan, do you care to switch?
I'll let you share. Yeah, I like your analogy here, though. The way you open up this article is like, what is the IMF?
Right. So Sean, when he writes his
articles, is he breaks it down. He does the explain
for the Reddit users out
there for people. So if you're kind of new to Bitcoin, but also you have, or you're not, I think these articles are like a perfect mix of. Take us through it here, and especially
how'd you come up with the Shaggy and
Scooby-Doo analogy?
Pretty
good one.
What is the IMF? The IMF and the World Bank are like the parallel universe versions of Shaggy and Scooby-Doo. They have no idea what they're doing, and yet the decisions they make determine how the show ends. The only difference is that no one wants to watch this version of the show because Shaggy and Scoob keep debasing your currency into oblivion. So it's
more and more
Scooby
snacks,
man. For you, man. no Scooby snacks, man.
The IMF promotes monetary cooperation and provides policy advice and capacity development support to preserve global macroeconomic and financial stability and help countries build and maintain strong economies. So to make it simple, the IMF serves as like short and medium term like financial control and quick fixes for shitty economies. IMF loans are funded mainly by the pool of quota contributors that its members provide, which is like literally posted on their website. So it's like not hard to see that like a centralized group of wealth controls monetary policy for, I don't know, Morgan, you probably know how many countries are managed actively by the IMF.
Lots. It's a massive number.
But
what's kind of interesting about the structure of the quotas too is it's like, hey, do this stuff and we'll give you money. So it's like it's bribe. They're bribing. countries that are doing stuff, and you know, there's been a lot of criticism of the kinds of countries that they also lend to. So a lot of them are great. Like a lot of the countries that they lend to, like they're doing great things with the money. They're, you know, reinvesting in their economy, all that stuff. But then a lot of the nations that they do approve for these programs, people are kind of like, well, there are some more systemic issues that we need to solve first before we give them a bunch of money, because we're afraid that they're going to kind of put it to you know, ill use. And then the level of compliance with these quotas is very variable from country to country. So it's kind of nuanced in the way that they do things, but continue.
Would you
Yeah.
Appropriate
to
to
compare the IMF to China
Red
initiative?
Kind of, except the level of investment is more so directed by individual nations. And so it's like, and as far as like physical infrastructure goes, like basically like for example, like the IMF might come into your country and be like, hey, your currency is collapsing, you should just peg it to the US dollar, right? Like you should just peg your currency to the US dollar. And then, by the way, you know, because you're on a fixed exchange rate monetary system, right? You can't do your own monetary policy, you can't do all this stuff. And so it's definitely a trade-off. And then if you kind of adhere to these policy goals, right, after a certain amount of time, we'll give you this loan, and then blah, 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 right? That's kind of what they do. And so part of that might be, hey, we really think you guys should invest in your national physical infrastructure. But it more so has to do with like monetary policy and fiscal kind of spending on other stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of the problems that the IMF has, obviously, like I talk about it in the article about like the fourth turning ideal, where you know, there's a cyclical 20 years cycles where there's thought to be like a crisis moment where you topple old existing institutions, and how Bitcoin can very much topple the old legacy financial institutions. And you know, another quote from the IMF blog, you know, there is a window of opportunity to maintain control over monetary and financial conditions and to enhance market integration, financial inclusion, economic efficiency, productivity, and financial integrity. So the most important part being there, the window of opportunity to maintain control. Like they're not hiding at all that they want to keep control of it. And then even when they speak directly on digital money and Bitcoin, you know, digital money must be designed, regulated, and provided so that governments maintain control over monetary policy to stabilize prices and over capital flows to stabilize exchange rates. Like it's not hidden at all.
Sean, what really stood out to me and hammered home that point to me was the quote that says the least stable of the lot, which hardly qualify as money, are crypto assets such as Bitcoin that are unbacked and subject to the whims of market forces. So the whims of market forces. So all of a sudden it becomes clear that the objective here isn't to promote open markets, right? It is exactly what you're saying. It's control. It's control.
Yeah.
Right.
Like they literally say, we don't want this to operate as a free market. We don't want the market to dictate anything.
Yeah, market forces in this case are bad to them. They just need as many levers that they can pull to control the economies and do all that stuff, which we've seen doesn't work. When you centrally plan economies, right? Not only is it arrogant because you believe you can kind of control things better than the market can, but it leads to inefficiencies and it implodes. It implodes. So this is bad juju, man. This is bad juju.
I think that as we continue to progress, I mean, obviously, there's already been an admittance that you know, blockchain technology and the existence of digital currencies are the way to go whenever it comes to this particular sector of finance, because every central bank wants to develop a digital currency now. So the admittance is already there that this is the way to go, and it's just everyone trying to fight to maintain their control over the system. And I think that as we continue to progress into a more digital age where there's a focus on digital money, and obviously, you know, Facebook changing their name to Meta because they want to focus on the metaverse and whatever, like with this push to a truly digital age, I think that maybe not in our lifetime, but there will be pushes to digital authoritarianism, and CBDCs aren't exactly a far stretch from that.
Well, it goes back to what I was saying, right? It's no coincidence. The biggest attempt at an authoritarian grab and the biggest attempt at freedom for the people. It's no coincidence.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Well, you guys, I have to hop, but I wish you guys a fantastic conversation going forward, and I'll see you guys a little bit later.
For sure.
Thanks for hopping on, Mike.
You gonna hit those waves?
Gonna hit those waves. Gonna spend a little time with the fam before I take off for Colorado.
Gotcha.
Yeah, my flight's at 4 today.
Well, you have a safe trip back to school.
Thank
we'll
you.
See you next week.
All right, sounds good. Huddle on,
Enjoy,
y'all.
buddy.
Later, brother.
All right. What was the?
And then there were.
What was the next one we wanted to go?
The next article.
Yeah, it was.
Oh yeah,
So
we were talking
Wozniak,
about.
right?
Yeah.
Bitcoin is
Mathematical purity says Apple co-founder Steve Wozniak.
I'm excited reading
This
this.
headline because I was like, oh, we got a big Apple guy.
Maybe a Bitcoin Maxi.
I haven't read this article, but Sean, from what you were telling me, it's not necessarily the case.
Yeah, no, and it doesn't really talk about it much in this article. It's just talking about how in his conversation, how he just refers to it as mathematical purity, because that's what it is. Like, he's acknowledges if there's inflation and your house goes up 10x in 40 years and you think you're a smart investor, no, you have an old house. You used to have a new house, but the government says 90% of its value and its earnings, we're going to tax that. The government makes all of its taxes in inflation, and then continuing to go down. Bitcoin doesn't even have a creator that we know of, isn't run by some company. It's just mathematically pure, and I believe nature over humans always. So like he's more speaking to this about just like, the hard cap 21 million, how there can never be any more. The only way that there's ever more is if there's a consensus split, at which point it's not even Bitcoin anymore. So like you really can't have more than 21 million. So he's just talking about how it's mathematically pure, but he doesn't actually understand Bitcoin as like an economic structure. He just gets the code and he just gets the math, and that alone is enough for him to say this is basically a force of nature that can't be taken down. So absent all the like crypto crap that we care about, and absent the Austrian economics and all that stuff, he just looking at the code is like, this is going to win. This is a force of nature. You can't beat it.
I mean, it seems like it's almost like he's been like just now starting to get
down the rabbit hole, which is a good thing, right? But I like what he says here, right? If there's inflation, your house goes 10x in 40 years, you think you're a smart investor. No, you have an old house, but not only that, it's like, if everybody's purchasing power has gone up, everybody's, let's say, wealth and your purchasing power hasn't changed. Like, you haven't outplayed the market. That's the whole point of being something that nobody else is getting into. And when the masses come, you're the one who's actually making the money at the end of the day. But that's not what's going on. 2-3 years, right? We've seen massive asset inflation, and I think he's smart to recognize, Bitcoin's not controlled by any one single entity, and it can retain. It's hard to obtain a US dollar, yada yada. That's part of the value proposition, right? Is that we're separating the control of money from government and putting it in the hands of the people.
And that's the part that he doesn't get, because later on in the article it says, however, Wozniak also showcased some misunderstandings about Bitcoin and the human right to privacy. the co-founder of Apple, said Bitcoin and some cryptocurrencies, quote, have a little bit of anonymity, end quote, which he doesn't see as a good thing. Quote, you should be able to stand up and say, I did this transaction, end quote. He said, questioning the need for privacy. So
Okay.
the separation of finance and state, the inception of privacy into your own financial sovereignty, he doesn't get that. He gets math. That's it.
Yeah. I think it's one of those statements that he hasn't really thought upon.
Right.
because like
I mean, with Bitcoin, you can always stand up and say you did this transaction. Like, there's no transaction on the blockchain that I might be like misunderstanding what he's trying to say here, but
I
there's no
think
such
what
thing.
he's referring to is the pseudonymity. Like you, like I think he understands that obviously through the blockchain that all the information is publicly available on a ledger. I think that he's just saying because your actual like legal name isn't attached to your Bitcoin wallet to say, hey, I did this. Like that's what I think he's saying he has a problem with.
you know, like
I don't understand when people say that.
Right.
Like, we need to know what everyone. Like, no, we don't. No, we don't. We're conditioned to think that that's normal, but it's not.
Right. Right. No, everybody has a right to privacy with that, and that's I can understand wanting to keep bad actors playing fair, right? And trying to make sure that, let's say that there was a layer 2 or layer 3 of 4 or 5 whatever of Bitcoin later on down the road. Maybe it's on Lightning, maybe it's on something else, where shit, I can't remember what the entity's called. The centralized entity that handles all the like stock certificates that trade as you like purchase equities and shit. If all that has to go on a public ledger and you have to keep track of it and like, trying to keep companies to adhere to like special guidelines, I can understand why you want to do it. But realistically, with the quantity that a company like that's going to have to do, it's not going to be hard to fucking figure it out.
Well, and it's like, the analogy I like to use in comparison to
laws,
right? Like, every
solution to fixing
mass shootings is to outright ban all the guns. But in reality, what you're doing there,
for allowing bad actors who
are going to act
regardless of what law says,
they're going to make their horrible, bad decisions, and now you're stripping something
used as a
protected tool away from the people that are going to use it well, and you're empowering the bad actors in a similar sense to, I guess,
have the confidence knowing that no one's gonna
come after them, right? Similar in
Right.
a similar sense, like in Cody's
hopping on here.
What is up, Cody?
Hey, what's going
What's
on?
up, guys? One sec.
We're just discussing. He's gone.
There he is. Yep.
All right, but yeah, no, I think that this is a good article because it can show that you can have understandings of like mathematical fundamentals of it and completely miss ideological fundamentals of it, and like that's okay. Like,
yeah.
The people from many different walks, different perspectives can look at this and be like, no, I can understand 100% why this makes sense, even if I don't agree with every single little thing. And like you were saying, this might just be the start of the rabbit hole. He might put another week, 2 weeks into, learning about it, reading some books, putting in some work himself. The dude's obviously a very talented coder himself. So he might put the work in, and maybe next month we're getting a completely different statement from Wozniak.
Yeah, right. Hopefully it doesn't go like Mark Cuban or Nicholas Taleb route.
Yeah, every time I think Cuban's gonna like learn something or figure it out, it just gets worse.
I mean,
Dude, I don't know if we talked about that whole entire interview.
That was like a month ago now, I think.
That Twitter Spaces were like
No, that was only a week ago.
Yeah,
2 weeks ago.
It wasn't that long ago. It was nothing but, I think it was basically Cuban on a treadmill and every like quote unquote influencer in the space trying to drop a buzzword. Like it was just a horrible experience. And Cody is having some.
I mean, let me message him real quick. I think he doesn't realize that he needs to use Chrome.
He's just like, he gets in, I see his face, he gets excited, and he's gone. Oh my god, that's funny. We're trying to get one of the coaches from the crypto course on right now, and he's having some technical difficulties for everyone wondering what the dead space is.
He's downloading Chrome right now.
He was hopping on. He was using fucking Brave, wasn't he?
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, I mean, I don't blame him. Losing track of where we were here. You can tell. If you can't tell, I haven't like fully woken up, and I'm like
That's a pretty impressively big cup of coffee.
Very big, dude.
Totally like that, or you're like me and you have child-sized
at all. Probably both. It's probably both. It's a pretty big.
Caffeine
I've been off of it for like months, and I just recently picked it back up this week. It's the worst thing ever. It's terrible. It literally like instantly, it was like being a drug addict, like who's been off clean, all of a sudden is like, I fucking need. I feel like I can't function without it.
I was gonna say, I thought that like if you took like a 2, 3, 4 month break from it, that it was like somewhat of a euphoric feeling whenever you like reintroduced it to your system.
Yeah, I feel like right now, I feel like I'm like my disk space is like skipping.
All right, what was the next article we wanted to go over?
It was
Bukele and Palestine. Do we want to talk about Bukele or Palestine?
We were talking about this before coming on the show. This is a fantastic website if you want to like orange pill. Bitcoinshit.com. A little bit vulgar. So if you're okay, let's be honest. By nature, Bitcoin maximalists, they have no filter, right?
I don't think so. I don't think so.
Funny. And the funny part
is this is great.
The literal, if you had just spent your money, and it shows you like the year something came out, right? So
this is like an instant pop
that came out in
2010.
And the 2010 ones are a little bit of like hindsight type stuff, right? Because I mean, let's be honest, like who was really into Bitcoin in 2010 besides punks and everything? So this might not be a good one, but it's still fun to look like, right? It says like if you bought Bitcoin instead of a fucking Instant Pot, you have 28.7, which I think is actually hilarious.
Just
let me see.
Just to see it.
Okay, a little bit more
recent, right? If you bought Bitcoin instead of fucking Wolf of Wall Street on Blu-ray, you'd have 1,130. That's surprising. That doesn't sound.
Look at the button. Look at the button.
Yeah, that was worth it.
It was worth it.
Even better, if you bought Bitcoin instead of fucking Astro World tickets, right? So that you Travis Scott fans out there, you have $3,249.
The buttons kill me. Ray Dalio is watching. Yo, this cracks me up.
What weird fucking software are you using?
The kind that you can't get on, Cody.
Let's go over. Oh, this is Whoops.
million times.
I was enjoying looking at your emojis. It's okay.
You
These are you.
No, I don't. I've loathed Apple for most of my entire life. Actually, I had one iPhone whenever I was in high school, and I have. What was that?
I've been trying to. I should probably ask this in a poll, right? But
It seems like Bitcoiners are pretty
50-50 split on Mac versus Android, or Mac versus Windows.
Yeah.
And I'm shocked. Actually, and I'm a Mac user myself, right? So I figured more Bitcoiners would be down the Android Windows train, just purely concerns. But I've heard a decent argument just for Macs. I mean, Apple overall traditionally has had, up until I guess recently, there's been some questionable stuff. But I mean, ultimately,
privacy is just one of those things, man.
and just very similar to how some like hardcore Maxis out there that will like go out, buy a laptop, wipe it, and then install Bitcoin Core in order to store their Bitcoin because they don't trust anything else.
Like you can be running like
Linux and a Googleized phone, and that's like something like isn't going to take the time to figure out how to do.
Yeah. I don't know. At first I thought that more Bitcoiners would be more like the Linux Android route, just because it's more open source, decentralized. But like, I don't know. It's kind of like how how Saylor has his quote where it's like, just because we're decentralized doesn't mean we have to be disorganized. So I feel like a lot of people probably just think that Apple products are just perform better, and it's as simple as that.
Yeah. In here. Downloaded our Voodoo software.
Yeah, you guys.
Put Chrome on there. Did you figure it out?
Yep. Yeah. Can you guys hear me? Is my mic working?
Yeah, you're good.
Yeah. Yeah. How's it going, guys? Happy White Paper Day. Yeah, look at that. Genesis block, close enough. I know.
Did you see what Corey Clipstein was saying?
No, I did not see what Corey Clipstein was saying the other day.
He's saying that we got the date wrong and we're off by a day.
13 years.
Oh, yeah, whatever. Close enough. Close enough. We tell time by block time. So, yeah. Technically speaking, everything before the Genesis block was, just in the mempool of like human existence, and it didn't exist until the Genesis block started. Because as we know, we tell time by block height. So.
Yeah. Can you tell?
Talking about Moscow time.
This is something I haven't taken the time to like get into. But
that was just during during Jack Dorsey's Senate testimony or whatever. He had a block clock in the background, and he had it for like how many sats per dollar. It was like 1,200 whatever, and so people were like, "Oh my God, what's wrong with that clock in the back?" And somebody made a joke that is like, "That's what time it is in Moscow," and so now like Moscow time is sats per dollar.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Anyways, so before you.
Oh, I was just gonna say, did you see Wozniak's comments on Bitcoin Cody?
No, but I'm sure that he's finally on board. Eventually everybody gets on board.
He's getting there. He said that he recognizes the mathematical purity, but that he doesn't understand the privacy.
Yeah.
It was a short article.
So I was like, whoa, we got a
big guy who's orange pill. Maybe he'll come speak at the Bitcoin conference. Actually, now that I think about it, we can make that happen. We could totally make that happen.
Yeah. I don't know. I would just make sure this is something that I notice is that we do a lot of is that somebody says one nice thing about us, and we're like the battered child who's like, "Oh, my daddy finally loves me," and then
Yeah.
and then like the stuff for I think somebody was like, "Hey, the Island Boys should come to the Bitcoin conference," and it was like the next day they're on Cameo shilling Hex and stuff, right? It's like, yeah, let's
We,
I will say internally
we shot that down
very fast.
very, very fast. We let people joke about it for a little bit, and then we eventually were like, hey, this is like not actually happening. Not actually happening. But we have been getting a lot of pushback, and I think it's because of the way we tweeted out. We put
Got a tweet saying,
and I think
there's like
9 people on the list of speakers, and for some reason everybody thinks we're only having 9 people speak. No, there's like 600 speaking at the Bitcoin conference. But one of the names we threw up was Andrew Yang, and all of a sudden, I guess we're a communist. But I've got no problem
speaking there.
honestly. It's not. And I say this because I think it's okay to expose people in their bad ideas, wrong ideas.
Yeah, I think there's like a time and place for it, right? Where like I was at San Francisco Bit Devs a couple days ago, and like there you're surrounded by like the smartest minds in Bitcoin, right? Like hanging out with like like Lightning developers and core contributors and stuff. And then while we're doing like the Socratic seminar thing of talking about it, like one guy's just going like, yeah, and all the opportunities in DeFi and all this kind of stuff. And then like you want to have like a Planet Fitness lunk alarm where it's like, okay, like stop, like this is not the place to be talking about this stuff. Not that it's like not a legitimate argument, but it's like you're surrounded by these people who have spent thousands of hours with this stuff, and when you start talking about the opportunities of the blockchain when you're at a BitDevs conference, it's like, all right, let's like you could go step outside, you can talk about Hex, and you can talk about Luna and Terra and all that kind of chia shit, right? But like we're having discussions about Bitcoin right now. Right.
But you Maxis are so toxic. You just don't understand about my DeFi project and blockchain.
Yeah.
Actually, you want to know? I've found that my new favorite form of toxic maximalism in a Twitter space 2 or 3 nights ago, because it was the funniest thing that Shinobi was on a space and he's talking, and somebody comes in the middle of the conversation, and the first thing that they say is they kind of shill on Shinobi for a second and start talking about like how smart he is in a previous conversation he had. And Shinobi just blew up on him. He's like, how dare you suck up to me? You don't know me. And I'm just like, this is it. This is my favorite form of maximalism. You're not allowed to shill the people that are in Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Sean, are you finally on?
Are you okay with saying you're
toxic? Well, okay, let me refrain. Are you on the toxic train?
I wouldn't say that I'm toxic. I'm definitely a maximalist, but I don't think that I'm toxic.
Yeah, a way that I've been explaining it more to like on the normie side of things is like, you guys know like the Dunning-Kruger effect, where it's that people who don't know anything about a topic and people who know a lot about a topic have the same confidence in their understanding of the topic. Because when you don't know anything about it, like you don't realize how much you don't know. And so it looks to be like a very simple problem. But then like once you start investigating it, then it's like you start falling down the rabbit hole, right? And then you realize like, oh my God, there's so much that I don't know about this stuff. And then eventually, as you're coming out the other side of like, there's probably like not that many people in the world left who know that much more about Bitcoin than like after you've like come out that side of the rabbit hole. And so when somebody over on that other side, like this is like where a lot of the toxic maximalism comes from, of that somebody's like, yeah, well, the base layer limitations of Bitcoin make it so that it can't scale as a world money. And you're like, okay, like, like person who's put in an hour of work into this and like, read an article by a newspaper who's like, is not allowed to own any, like,
on CoinDesk.
Let's, before you start saying speaking in these absolutes, like let's Let's go
I just love
investigate
the
that.
wording where you say an article, not a article, just one.
Yeah.
Singular.
Just
You just
one.
needed one goddamn.
Yeah. You know, it's like one of
Dude,
those ones where you want to be like, it's like, hey, well, how do you know that stuff? It's like, because I've read a book about this, which is infinitely more than you've done, and not have only read a book. I've read many books on this topic, and I've like done the work, and I've like run my own node, and I've done all this other stuff, and like you who have read an article about this by somebody who has never owned it or interacted with the protocol, is trying to tell me that like this cannot be a base layer money for the world. It's like I've gone through all of the stuff that you have, and so that's why people find it so annoying because it's like you spent thousands and thousands of hours on this stuff, and people are just like did you guys see the thing? It was Eric, I forget his last name or whatever. He goes on the HODL Hangouts with John Vallis, where he was just like, he was like, "What's the most annoying argument that you hear about Bitcoin?" And he's like, "You can't live in a Bitcoin." Of like why you shouldn't buy it instead of real estate, and it's like just like the person thinks that they're so smart for saying something like that, and you're like, you have demonstrated nothing but your own ignorance and stupidity. Like I'm so right.
It's insane. I mean,
The funny thing though is like that,
like the bell curve meme, right? Like for a while
Yeah.
it was like, oh, that's a funny joke. The more you start hearing these kind of arguments, you're like, this is the most accurate fucking meme I've ever met or like seen in my fucking life. And I consider my person on the left side percent, right? So like
Yeah.
coming into the crypto course,
like
looking back at like some of the comments I was saying, I was like, I was that fucking person who was like tossing around words and ideas like a very like not even high level, like the basic stuff that like everybody who comes in starts saying. And now,
Yep.
working for Bitcoin podcast, having surrounded myself with people very smart and talented individuals, I'm like, I'm a fucking poser. Like I don't know anything at all. I'm reading every single book and article that I can, and the more that I like read, the more I'm like, I don't know what I know.
Yep. Every time I start to feel good about myself, I see a Twitter thread from like Plan B that I can't keep up with or something. I'm like, why? Like, why? Where's my time gone? It's done me nothing.
No.
I'm at the point now though where it's like, maybe some people will be mad at me for saying this. I'm kind of tired of
the philosophy
of like Bitcoin, and I'm now at the point where I'm like, I need to learn how to fucking code. But I don't know where to start. Like that's like such like a daunting task, right? Somebody has like no coding experience, like doesn't or C++, and that's probably not even where I should start. There's probably something even more like rudimentary there. But I'm like, this is gonna be like a decade-long process, and by that time, all these smart people. But I don't know. Maybe I just fucking suck it up and start doing it.
I still
Yeah.
do that like free code academy thing. I think I've done like 2 certifications on that. I still feel like I know nothing. Yeah.
Dude, the only coding I've done,
Terrified
I did
to
it
pick
like
up programming Bitcoin.
did it when I was like a freshman in high school, and it was learning how to code basic HTML, and I couldn't even tell you how to do any of that now because it's been so fucking long.
Yeah.
And then Cody's a shadowy super coder over here just laughing at us. So.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, like the way I started, because again, I was like a ground pounder like before this, and then I was like, I want to get technical, and so I kind of like started from the like, where do I do this stuff, and now I'm at the point where I'm like I can build stuff now, where it's not like, because I remember that was like a big moment for me, where before I think I was kind of doing the stuff of FollowFiat, very nice. The stuff that you were doing of like do the Code Academy certification or whatever, and it's like, oh, okay, I can do some like LeetCode problems, and I can like write a Python script, and I was like, that's learning to code or whatever. And it's like, now there's like a different elements of it, right? And so it's like, do you want to like build stuff? And if you want to build stuff, what platform do you want to build stuff on? Or like, do you want to build mobile apps? Do you want to build web apps? Like, do you want to build stuff that plugs Bitcoin in on the back end and that kind of stuff? Or do you want to do like data science? Do you want to do analytics? Do you want to do DevOps? Like, there's all sorts of different paths you can go down, and like as you start going down those, it's like the issue I had for also like going very broad at the beginning, and like the thing that I got the most value out of was like I want to do full stack JavaScript apps, just because then I kind of like understand, hey, this is how I can build an application like front to back. And then once you know how to do that, then you can go and like, okay, now I want to go like much more into the back end side of things and learn about how like distributed systems work and that sort of thing. Or if I want to do more on like the DevOps side or like security side, then you could do that. But like once you kind of get how to build an application front to back, then you can be like, all right, now I know enough that I can kind of focus on the part that suits me best. But it's sort of like the Dunning-Kruger effect, just like we're talking about, where it's like there's so much with when you talk about like learn to code, that's just like such a giant world. It's like, hey, I want to learn to speak, and it's like, okay, well, what language? What are you going to be doing? Like, you know, like, are you going to be living in Africa? Because then maybe there's certain languages that you should prioritize over others, right? And like those sorts of things. And so, like that's the big drawdown from people. They're like learn to code, right? And so, yeah, I don't know if that was helpful. But
Let's work through this, right?
So from like a Bitcoin perspective, like if someone says learn to code, where the fuck do you start?
Yeah, I would say like there's kind of like two elements for it, right? Of like one is like, do you want to be a developer or like work on product side of things? And then there's like the data science side of things. And so if you want to like be a developer and work on product and that sort of stuff, then that's a very different skill set than the data science stuff. And if you already have an existing skill set, the developer stuff is very different and separate and like not the same thing at all. Versus on the data science thing, you can take, if you're like a good marketer or you're a good like design guy or something like that, right? Then you can take the data science stuff and you can supplement your existing. The data science stuff is mostly done in Python. And so that's just like do like data quest or do free code camps, got like a scientific computing with Python thing. And if you want to do Bitcoin specifically, Justin Moon's got one called a Mooniversity that's got like basic Python stuff. And then after doing Mooniversity, you could do like programming Bitcoin via Jimmy Song. There's like kind of a whole Python track of things to do, but that's like a very, very different skill set than on the development side, where that's more like, you know, like what I did was I did full stack JavaScript first, and now finished off of there and going into more of the back end side of things of like doing microservices and distributed services with Golang. And that's kind of like my focus, because I want to do like Lightning development stuff and like L&D's Golang, and there's a bunch of cool applications being built on that side. So, but that's like a very different side, where if you threw me in front of like a complex data science Python stuff, like I would need like a couple hours in order to just like get back up to speed on like Python syntax and like scikit and like NumPy and all that kind of stuff, right? Where like I haven't touched that stuff in a long time. And because that's a very different thing than the stuff that I'm trying to focus on, just decide first, do I want to go on like the learn data science so that I can supplement my existing skill set? That's like do a couple weekends of learning how like some basic statistics and how the basic packages in Python work. Versus if I want to go on the developer side, that's like I'm going to spend the next year learning like how all this stuff goes, because it's very much like falling down the Bitcoin rabbit hole, where like, you know, you're more dangerous than helpful at first, because there's so many security concerns when you're building product. And so like if you look at all of these DeFi hacks and all that kind of stuff, like I can guarantee you that's like, you know, they have some junior developers who like just do not have that much experience with it. And they're like, oh, you know, like I heard this happen to somebody they were building out a JavaScript backend for it, and just for their what's called for like their, while they were in development, they were just like allowing cross-site scripting, because they were like, yeah, I just want to be able to do this stuff. And then they forgot to protect against it when they deployed the project. And then it's like, okay, like this is like web dev 101. Like what is going on? And the reason why was just they'd never deployed a project before, and so like they did, and they got some money thrown at them, and like they didn't have like more experienced security concerns, and so stuff like that, right? Versus on the Python side of things, like you're not gonna like break somebody's application just by bringing data to bear in an argument about like marketing or whatever.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, if you're gonna try to go down the Python route and learn that, is it worthwhile to try and learn like basic HTML or C++?
No. So all that, so C++, so like C++ is like a back-end development language, right? HTML is a front end like web dev design language, and so you can get really good at like HTML, CSS, JavaScript of like doing front end stuff. Then that's like a development side of things. But if you get good at like the Python side of things, then that's, you know, there's basically just a couple packages in Python like NumPy and scikit, and if you get good at those, then you can do like complex data science stuff, and you can, as in your work as a marketer or in your work as a account executive or whatever, right? It's like now instead of just doing the soft skill stuff, now you have a hard skill that you can bring to it as well, where instead of just being like, hey, this is my like random assessment of these things, you can do like complex surveys and try to extract insights from them, that sort of stuff, right? Like that's not the stuff that I'm focused on, but like that's something where if you already have an existing skill set, you can supplement it by learning a little bit of Python in order to, and statistics, so that instead of just be like, this is how I feel about this, is like, this is what the data supports. Versus if you're going on the development side, like that's for me, I'd like never done any user interface stuff or user experience stuff. And so that's like an entire different skill set that you have to learn, and it takes a long time. And there's also like elements of it where it's like you need taste and you need like good design, like kind of like a good feel for design. And it's like I don't really have that, and that's kind of why I'm focusing on the back end stuff, where like I get like security concerns and I get architecture, and so that's where I'm focusing on it. But like if you're like Sean, I know you do a lot of like writing and content creation and stuff, right? Where if you were going to go on the development side, then maybe going more on the front end side of things, of learning HTML, CSS, JavaScript, so that, and you can like build stuff that like looks really nice or whatever.
Yeah, fair enough. I kind of want to learn how to do some of the back end stuff, mostly just like from an idea of being able to read music and understand it. Like I don't want to be like a back end developer or building product or anything. I just want to be able to look at something and know what the fuck I'm looking at.
Yeah, I think that's like that's also a different thing. And like once you get good at like one of them, then you can kind of port over to figure out the next one. I think like someone was like, takes a year to learn your first language, a month to learn your second, a week to learn your third. And because like at that point, it's stuff like, oh, hey, so if this is a object-oriented language, this is basically like, this is the syntax that they use for it, but I can kind of figure out how the way that this stuff works, right? And then if it's a C-based language, then you can very quickly just, if you know C or you know C# or you know C++, you can kind of figure out the other ones for it. Like I'm learning, like not learning, but like I'm getting like really focusing on Go recently, and for that one, that's a more C-based language, but it's you see, because Go is aware versus a lot of other languages that were made like prior to the internet being like a thing. And so there's a lot of stuff from JavaScript. It's kind of like a intersection between JavaScript and C in my experience. And so like I know a lot more JavaScript than I do C. And so as I've gotten better at Go, then when I encounter something that's written in C or C++ or whatever, right, then I'm like, it's kind of like go to JavaScript to Golang, and then I see that C stuff, and then it kind of like starts making sense to me. But yeah.
I've got a long ways to fucking go. I need to like start after the somewhere. But we've all right. So we brought the data science stuff like a couple of times. This is something like I really haven't thought about at all, right? So obviously, Google, all like right, as the web is like all of the harvesting data and selling it to marketers or whoever wants the fucking data, right? There's I'm thinking about it, like, is there any harvestable data that would be
all the
beneficial
on-chain
to-
analytics guys.
Yeah, but I mean, outside of that, like, I mean, like, it's a very niche market. It's very cornered and not like, I don't know.
Yeah. Well,
Is there a lack of is it because there's a lack of applications, right? Like as we see like more layer 2s start to get built that are less secure, sacrifice for functionality, like are we just gonna down the line?
Not really. I mean, there's
you don't think so?
Yeah, there's a couple, like Balaji Srinivasan's got like a really good take on it, where he's like, hey, the like the Treaty of Westphalia going forward is going to be like, like on the left, they're very concerned about like not discriminating against people and that kind of stuff. On the right, they're very concerned about like not doxing and canceling people. And the solution is going to be pseudonymous or anonymous work. And so for like one of the great things about like login with Lightning systems is that like if you do an LNURL authentication, then I can log in and basically I have a persistent identity as like just a just as a hash. And so I can do what I want. I can start building up reputation with that. I can have a wallet associated with it, because if you're Google or your Facebook or whatever, like the reason why you're collecting all my data is because you have no mechanism for monetizing me. But if I open the relationship with you with a mechanism to monetize, where I log in with my Lightning wallet, and then maybe I put like 10,000 sats on your platform or something, and then in order to interact and do stuff on your platform, I like use those 10,000 sats that I basically like put up as that one, then you don't necessarily need to take my data anymore, right? It's like, all these people where they're like, oh, I wish I could have Twitter without the like ads and all that kind of stuff. I would pay this amount for it. Like with Lightning, you can be like, yeah, well, put your money where your mouth is, right? Is that if you don't want this stuff, then this is how much we think that we're going to make off you. Or if you're just willing to pay us that up front, then we won't do any of our advertising mechanisms for you. And so that's kind of where I see things going.
More
Is
like
there
a meritocracy.
decent?
It seems like.
Okay.
Well, it's a more honest relationship, right? Because right now it's like, oh, look at this stuff, I'm providing it for free. And it's like, no, I'm not providing it for free. Like I'm monetizing your data, right? Versus like, because you can be honest and direct with your consumer, then my incentives as the service provider become just to provide you a valuable service. Yeah, sorry, my dog's freaking out.
Is there a will DIDs become a thing? Those decentralized identifiers. I don't know how they look like on like an actual engineering back end view, but conceptually they sound like they could be like a partial answer to data harvesting.
Yeah. I think maybe. I mean, it becomes very difficult because when you start talking about identity, you start talking about how do I interact with others, right? And like as the state continues, I still need a persistent identity with the state, right? And like it would be nice if I could just like selectively go back and forth or whatever, right? But like they have security concerns and that sort of stuff, and I have security concerns as well. Like if I want to own a house, I need a persistent identity tied to that house. But the idea would be that I can create and selectively reveal what's called my identity. And so, like for example, if I'm opening up a relationship with you, then I have like my one layer of identity with you, which is that I like have a persistent pseudonym based off of the community that you're in, right? So it's like when I join a Telegram group, I have a pseudonym associated with that. And then when I log into something else, then like my Telegram group about LNURL or whatever, right, does not need to know about my Telegram group with like, my job or something. Right. And it's just kind of like that, where you can just selectively reveal yourself. Like if you read the Cypherpunk manifesto, like one of the things that they write about is like privacy is not secrecy. It's like privacy is just the decision to selectively reveal parts of your identity that you want revealed. And that's your decision at that point. And so I think it's just like Lightning just enables that, where I can reveal to Twitter exactly as much data as I want to reveal to Twitter, such that I get the service that I want from them. Right.
Do you think there's a large enough incentive right now, or maybe in the next 5 years, for people to really start taking that kind of stuff seriously? Because as it stands right now, like the masses aren't gonna really give a shit to like take.
Yeah, I think you're. Yeah, I forget who. It might have been John Vallis, might have been Robert Breedlove or whatever. But they're like, our incentives shape our behavior, and right now there's no opportunity for it, and so people don't know what they want, and it's like I know it was the Henry Ford thing of like, if I'd asked people what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse. And so once you give people the opportunity with like an Umbrel personal server to be like, hey, you can get all of the advantages that you want from your data persistence of your cloud stuff, but you you can own it yourself. Like you don't have to deal with all this kind of crap, and it's just super easy. You just keep it at home, and like, Tor gets better because they tie it into routing nodes, and so you can pay to route Tor traffic, right? Once they do that, then it just becomes like, hey, do you want to own your data or not? And if it's easy for people, then they're like, yeah, sure, I'd like to own my data, right? And so that's
the biggest
probably where
robbery
it
of
goes.
The biggest
Probably
robbery
the
of the
21st
century, right?
Well, inflation,
Yeah.
I would argue, but
I think
the two go hand in hand.
though.
yeah, I've been
For sure.
trying to write about it a little bit, but I've been here. I'm gonna just bounce this off you guys. So I've been thinking about things in terms of price asymmetries, where there's a certain group of people who understand and have, it's kind of like the Cantillon effect, but not exactly like access to the money printer, but knowledge that the money printer is going, right? And so, because I've
Yeah.
noticed when talking to people where they're unaware of what's going on, that they're like, hey, why is BlackRock buying up all these homes and all this kind of stuff, right? And it's like, well, if you know anything about BlackRock, then you know that they can take out these long-term 1.4% blended interest rate, and therefore, like the fact that they're paying 20% over asking price, like even like in just all of these markets, is like, if you know about it, then it makes tons of sense that they're doing that, right? Because you can just like see the model that they're making, and they're operating based off of, this is how the denominator works, right?
Right.
And so with the denominator is basically your ruler of like, this is what my general understanding of the money supply is. And I think it's even a little bit more, just like an extra layer of it, is that everybody operates their life as like, this is my broad understanding of the money supply. My salary or like my net wealth or whatever that is, that becomes like my measuring stick that I use. And that my salary divided by what my broad understanding of the money supply is for judging other transactions. And so I think like, hey, is $400 expensive for this thing? Well, I make $100,000 a year, which gives me this amount of purchasing power based off of my understanding of the broad money supply, and therefore it's bad or it's good or it's bad, right? But for all the people who understand that the money supply has expanded and their salary like by 30%, and their salary has not gone up by 30%, they're getting taken advantage of by the people who do understand that the money supply has expanded. And so they know that even though you're making $100,000 a year, that's like in equivalent purchasing power to $70,000 a year the previous year, right? And I haven't fully fleshed it out yet, but like I think pricing asymmetries is kind of the way to think about it. I don't know, but
Yeah, I think so I try to have this
With
like a lot of my friends. Some of them understand it, others are like an ostrich with their head in the sand, right? And
to do
like my buddies who get it have either business or finance, like they're
random money.
Mhm.
And then I have friends
who are like other STEM fields, engineering, who aren't
really into money.
and they don't understand the fact that their purchasing power in the last 20 years has been cut by
100%.
and for them it's like
They're measuring.
they're still like, they see all like asset inflation,
To them, it's like a big win.
versus like my business and finance buddies who are like, nobody's fucking winning here. Like,
Yeah.
if everybody's like, and Wozniak made the same comparison, right? Like, if everybody's house increases 10%, right, in like the last 20 years, like nobody's purchasing power has actually increased at all. So I think in the way, I think if you're going to write this article, right, it needs to be as dumbed down as possible.
Already understand it.
Yeah, I think it's less about the fact that it's happening and more about, I think there's a predatory aspect to it, of like, there's the people who are aware that the price asymmetry is there, and they're taking advantage of the people who aren't. And I think that they're doing it knowingly.
But that's been going on since the 70s, pre-70s even. I mean, like in like modern times, 71. I mean, it's like the Cantillon effect in a nutshell, right? Like, people understood, like, if they continuously debase the wealth, like, they're going to receive all the benefits of it. And we've seen it recently in the last year with Amazon, right? And some of these big box stores, like, all the small businesses got shut down. It forced everybody to spend their money at like Amazon, Target, Best Buy.
And so all the money that
should have been kind of distributed down to the smaller guy ended up just getting robbed, putting those people out of business, and now there's less competition going on. I think because of how abrupt, so like this has been going on right forever. Things that
people are exposed now to
this robbery of,
and I think
the thing that really is going to tip things over
is if
this unrealized capital gains
tax goes into
effect. Like essentially now what you're
this current administration
trying to figure out, right? It's like, how do we fund this build back better fiasco and pull us out of this economic?
It costs zero.
Yeah,
It costs zero.
$0, right?
Just
It costs
we're just
$0.
Tax money that you don't technically even have.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's I think so. Here's to
get to your point, right?
Yeah. So for a long time, the people at the top have been taking advantage of it. I think you're correct in that sense. But I think a lot of people now, all of us here in this, like as like the normies, like are understanding, like, hey, like this is messed up, and it's why we're also drawn to
Bitcoin.
It's why the gold bugs were so big into this coin. And like the problem with the gold.
Yeah, no, but I mean, it's
long
like
time.
it's the thing for it is that I think you could just kind of summarize it as like pure a short speculative attack, because like like I do it of taking out long-term, low interest, not mark-to-market liabilities in order to purchase more Bitcoin.
Like
Okay,
I guess I'm guilty.
It's like all these,
right? Is like what's coming.
Yeah,
and
it's
so like you're literally like, I'm gonna fucking take this loan out because I know I'm actually losing money, not borrowing, right?
Yeah. Well, it's just like I mean, it's like it's one of the things that for all of us, it's like if coin the way that we did, then we wouldn't be able to buy any, right? So like it's kind of nice that
we would be on.
We have this information. Yeah, we have this information asymmetry, which gives us the opportunity to accumulate generational wealth, right? But it's also.
Do you feel like that asymmetry is like for me? Because like for me, right, from 2017, I came in 2017, still around the same time, right?
No, I was
Cody.
2020.
2020. Oh, damn. So for me,
2017
to now, it is definitely like the playing field has definitely changed a lot, right? Like in 2017, when I was going to family and telling them about Bitcoin, like I was the crazy fucking person at Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
And they're like, look at this crazy kid. He's wasting on make-believe currency that doesn't even exist. I work in the industry now, and maybe it's just because I have a job. Maybe solidified it more for family, but like people asking about Bitcoin, asking like, hey, what is it? How do I buy into it? And like, it has to do with like price increases and stuff. But there's this stark difference between 2017 and 2020. As like the economy continues to not itself, and people are realizing that like there's supply shortages all around the world, and like their purchasing power by the day can like continue. Like the fucking Starbucks yesterday, right? We got 2 coffees. It was 18. Like not even like the fancy shit. Like, and I'm sitting here thinking, I'm like, how is like I'm never fucking doing this again for one, but B, like I don't know how people who and like I'm sitting in this drive-through, right? Like 20 cars sitting in this line. I'm like only person sitting in this line thinking that these prices are fucking batshit crazy. Like like a year ago, they weren't that much. So I don't know. I think the asymmetry very quick, and it's hard. And it's hard for me to separate myself. Like, we're in an echo chamber all the time. Like everybody I surround myself with, like understands Bitcoin, understands what's happening to the globe. To like step away and really put 2 and 2 together. It's like, is everybody starting
like understand what's going on.
or is it just because I'm in this bubble of people?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, like we always talk about it as like the gradually then suddenly thing. With I know like Parker Lewis, he's got his whole thing on it, but it's like if you guys remember, like I always think about like those couple days for coronavirus where it was like remember like about it in like January, like hey, we're gonna have to
Mhm.
like start wearing masks and they're gonna try doing this stuff and all that kind of stuff, and then like nobody, everybody was like, "Hey, you're Chicken Little," that kind of stuff. Because I was reading Balaji's for Navasan, and so I was like, you know, like I was just kind of like, "Hey, like there's a lot of shit, like crazy shit that could be happening in response to this," and then all in one day, it was like Tom Hanks got it in Australia. They canceled March Madness. Bill Ackman had his giant short position on and went around to CNBC and told everybody that the world was going to end. And then like another thing happened. And all those things happened on the same day. And then like smack, like everybody got on board, like holy oh, and it was that like Italy got it. Like Italy started to like, have crazy experiences. And it was like all of a sudden everything just came together. The stock market starts crashing, everybody loses their minds and all that kind of stuff, right? And it's like I think that eventually happens because that's just the game theory suggestion, right? Is that the moment that if you look at like Portugal is doing so much to get like remote workers and all this kind of stuff. Like the moment somebody calls the bluff on this, and it's like, you know, like an English speaking country or like just somebody who's kind of like more in the ether than El Salvador, the moment that they're like, we bought $1 billion worth of Bitcoin, we're not ashamed of it, we're buying more.
Dude,
all of the incentives
fucking-
become
we're
for
there.
everybody to go buy it.
I mean, you
Yeah.
look like Belgium, Ukraine, El Salvador, and I think there's one that's been very public about, hey, we're buying Bitcoin.
No, I mean like,
Like,
but it's like more on the one where
I
a central
know what you're
bank,
saying. You're like,
which can
you're
issue
like,
its, like a central bank that is printing its own money, says, "Hey, we're buying this," because right now it's a bunch of people trying to protect themselves against those central banks.
yeah.
But the moment
But
that
it's-
like the European Central Bank, or the moment that
Yeah.
the Bank of Canada, or the moment that the Bank of England, or the moment that the U.S. government, or just anybody who has a
Right.
money printer, says, "Hey, we're buying some now," then it's like all the dominoes flip, and then immediately it's just like how fast can you buy this stuff? Because you know, just imagine that, because you know how like President Bukele, he's just on the dips. He's like, "Hey, we just bought 150 more." Like, "Hey, we got this amount. Hey, we like bought this amount." Like, imagine what happens where it's like day after day. It's like, "Hey, the Portuguese government just purchased this amount," and then the Spanish government goes like, "All right, well now we're going to purchase this amount," and then Germany
Mhm.
goes, "All right, now we're going to purchase this amount," and then all of a sudden it's like mad rush. And like that has to happen in response to it, because the game theory behind it is like, if these guys start doing it, then I have to do it as well.
Yeah,
no,
and
and
I totally agree with you. I think the point that I'm trying to bring up is that like I'm seeing like right now in like the last week what's happened. We've had all the ETFs launch, right? We've U.S. Bank start like they're gonna start custodying. That's big news. We have pension funds that are starting to buy into Bitcoin. We hit an all-time 2 weeks ago, right? And like all these things haven't done a ton for price action, like hardly anything at all. And like what you're trying to get at here is like what event that like triggers everybody into this mad frenzy. I really don't think we're far out from it at all. Right now, it's like I'm still trying to get my like hold on like as much Bitcoin as like I possibly can.
Yeah,
I don't think we're far out. Is we've seen all these bigger institutions start getting their piece of the pie. We've seen obviously El Salvador here get onboarded onto the network. There's talks of like Portugal, Ukraine. We got a lot of sitting U.S. senators. We got a lot of states that are very pro Bitcoin. I think the things that are going to set things in. I think the 100K psychological barrier is going to be one that really triggers a lot of people to start setting things in motion. also like an eye on just like the petrodollar and where what the Middle East and like Europe decides the energy crisis going on right now. And if we start seeing like Exxon, we start seeing like ExxonMobil shift from, because this is my big question right now, is like, are mining companies going to become the next energy companies going to adopt mining going forward? And so when we reach things like we have 100K, we hit 100K, we see a massive like influx of these energy companies start focusing heavily on mining Bitcoin. Right. Top of that, you have like either state, and I don't think it's got to be a big nation state. I think it's just got to be just another domino to fall. Like there's going to be all of a sudden this mad rush for, like you said, try and gobble up as much wealth in Bitcoin as they can possibly. Like, and they're already doing it.
Yeah, it's like Naval Ravikant. He did this a while ago, where he's like, the fastest way to change your position on the global stage is buy $2 billion worth of Bitcoin and announce it. And once you announce it, like, sure, dump it, like, right? But like, that is the easiest trade in the world for anybody to do right now, right?
I feel like
any central bank
though would be
no,
like
it's just any central bank, just because any central bank is, imagine it's just like, you know, like the United, like they wanted to pay for their Build Back Better agenda or whatever, right? It's like, you know, just like buy $10 billion worth of Bitcoin, announce that you've bought it, then the price runs up, you do a bunch of the sell side, and then you're like, yeah, whatever. But like, and like, you know, the U.S. government couldn't do that,
here's the catch
right?
20,
but like, this is
the
the
catch-22 though. Here's the catch-22 with that, right? Is like, yeah, it's the easy. One of the central entities decides to do that. They have admitted their system. They've officially Bitcoin, and it's here to stay. And like, I think that's why we haven't seen that kind of play happen yet. Because like that's like last ditch like effort to like try and seize control. Like that is like the nuclear option for them.
Yeah.
Assured destruction, I guess, essentially.
Yeah, but I mean, like, for example, you know, well, I guess because remember when El Salvador announced, the price didn't run. But yeah, I don't know. All right, I gotta roll. Good talking to you guys.
Yep, thanks for coming on, bud.
See you, Cody. Later.
That's probably a good time to cut it because we were supposed to cut it an hour anyway.
I know. We're at an hour and 47 right now. So good conversation. 2 parts to it. We got a lot in the works here for the channel. The first book club is actually going on today, and that should be up on Wednesday. But we're bringing on more content creators for the channel. For the show, aside from the Sunday scaries. I know Sean is working on getting interviews in the works, so we're going to be heading back to that. An interview coming up with and I think it'll be something that a lot of people want to listen to. I don't want to say who it is yet, but Sean's got that in the pipeline. But yeah, no, so a lot of content. Please hit like, subscribe button. Go follow Sean at @follow_of_fiat on Bitcoin Magazine as well. He's written 3 articles. I think you got another one going up pretty soon.
Should have one going up sometime this week. I don't know what the schedule is, but yeah.
Yeah, and it's it'll be a time pretty. Sean's going after some I guess yellow belt Maxi level stuff. For those of you that are
above yellow belt.
I'm a proud yellow belt Maxi. But yeah, be on the lookout. Be on the lookout for that. Yeah, make sure to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell.
myself
at Alan Hoddle. You guys have a great start to your week. Good to see you as always, man.
Yep. You too, bud.